Dr. Phil did something he'd never done in 30 years of television. He stopped mid-sentence, looked directly at the camera operator, and said two words that froze everyone in the studio. "Stop rolling." The woman sitting across from him had just uttered a confession so raw, so unexpected, that the script became meaningless. What happened in the next 12 minutes would change not just her life, but everyone who witnessed it. The white envelope in Dr. Phil's hand trembled slightly as he stood up from his chair. The studio lights felt hotter than usual. The audience, packed into their tiered seats, leaned forward in collective breath-holding silence. This wasn't supposed to happen. Talk shows have rhythms, beats, commercial breaks timed to the second. But something had just shattered that carefully constructed reality. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. At least, that's what we'll call her. 34 years old, mother of two, married for 11 years to a man she described as her high school sweetheart. She'd come to Dr. Phil's show with what seemed like a common complaint. Her husband didn't listen to her anymore. The intake producers had categorized it as a communication breakdown episode. Standard stuff. They'd done hundreds of these. But Sarah had been lying. Not to Dr. Phil. To herself. The confession that stopped everything came exactly 18 minutes into the taping. Dr. Phil would later say he felt it coming, the way you feel a storm building before the first drop of rain. It started normally enough. Sarah sat in the beige armchair, hands folded in her lap, makeup carefully applied to hide the sleepless nights. Her husband, Mark, sat in the chair beside her, arms crossed, already defensive. Dr. Phil had begun with his signature directness. "So you say your husband doesn't hear you? What is it he's not hearing?" Sarah opened her mouth to deliver the rehearsed answer, the safe answer, the answer that would keep her marriage's secrets buried where they'd been for 5 years. But something in Dr. Phil's eyes, something in the way he leaned forward, not as a television host but as a human being truly asking, truly wanting to know, broke something open inside her. "He doesn't hear me when I say I want to die." The studio went silent. Not the polite, anticipatory silence of an audience waiting for the next beat. The kind of silence that happens when oxygen leaves a room. Mark's arms uncrossed. His face drained of color. Dr. Phil's hand, which had been gesturing toward the cameras as part of his usual rhythm, stopped midair. He placed both hands on his knees, leaned forward until he was almost off his chair, and looked at Sarah with an intensity that made the hundreds of people in that studio disappear. "Say that again," he said quietly. "Not for the cameras. For her." "I want to die," Sarah whispered. "I've wanted to die for 5 years. And he..." Her voice cracked. "He thinks I'm talking about wanting more date nights." That's when Dr. Phil stood up. The envelope he'd been holding, containing questions from the producers, fell to the floor. He looked at the camera operator, then at the director in the booth, then back at Sarah. "Stop rolling." The camera operator's hand hesitated on the equipment. "I said stop the cameras," Dr. Phil repeated, his voice carrying the weight of 3 decades of authority. "Clear the audience. Production staff only. Now. If you're watching this, you need to understand something. Subscribe and leave a comment, because what I'm about to tell you about what happened when those cameras stopped is the most powerful part of this story." The audience filed out in confused silence. 300 people who'd driven from all over the country, waited in line for hours, sat through makeup checks and energy warm-ups, now exiting with nothing but questions. The heavy studio doors closed with a metallic thunk that echoed through the suddenly cavernous space. Only 6 people remained: Dr. Phil, Sarah, Mark, 2 producers, and a crisis counselor who'd been on standby. Standard protocol for episodes dealing with mental health always had someone in the wings. But this counselor, Dr. Rebecca Torres, had been leaning against the wall checking her phone, not expecting to be needed for a communication episode. Dr. Phil walked over to Sarah's chair. He didn't sit back down in his host chair. He pulled up a production stool, the kind the crew uses during setup, and sat at her eye level, maybe 2 feet away from her. Close enough that they could have been in a living room, not a television studio. "The cameras are off," he said. The audience is gone. It's just us now. And I need you to tell me the truth, Sarah. Not for a show. For you. When did this start? Mark looked like he wanted to interrupt, to defend, to explain. Dr. Phil held up one hand without even looking at him. Not now. Sarah's hands were shaking. Dr. Phil reached out, not to touch her, but to offer his hand palm up, an invitation. She placed her trembling fingers in his palm. 5 years ago, she said. After my daughter was born. Postpartum depression? That's what they said. They gave me pills. They told me it would pass. But it didn't. It got worse. The pills made me numb, but the thoughts didn't stop. They just... She searched for the word. Waited. Every morning I'd wake up and the first thought would be, today could be the day I don't have to do this anymore. Dr. Phil's jaw tightened. Not with judgment. With recognition. He'd heard this before, in 1,000 different voices, in 1,000 different contexts. But every single time, it landed with the same crushing weight. Did you tell anyone? I told Mark I was tired. I told my doctor I couldn't sleep. I told my mother I needed help with the kids. Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper now. But I never said the words. Because saying the words makes it real. And if it's real, then I'm broken. And if I'm broken, then my kids deserve better than me. That's when Mark broke. Not with anger. With grief. Sarah. He choked out, and then couldn't finish the sentence. He put his head in his hands. Dr. Phil looked at Mark, then back at Sarah. Can I tell you something? He asked her. And I need you to really hear me right now. Sarah nodded. You are not broken. You are hurt. And hurt is not the same as broken. Broken things can't heal. Hurt things? They heal when they get the right care. But you have to let people in. You have to stop translating your pain into something smaller, something more digestible, something that won't scare people. Because your pain? It should scare people. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're in danger. From yourself. Dr. Phil paused, and in that pause something shifted in the room. It was like watching a lock click open. Sarah's shoulders, which had been hunched in defensive protection for God knows how long, slowly straightened. I don't know how to ask for help, she admitted. I don't know how to say, I need someone to take my kids for a week. I need someone to sit with me while I cry. I need someone to hide the pills and check on me at 3 a.m. when the thoughts are loudest. Who asks for that? What kind of burden is that? The kind that keeps you alive, Dr. Phil said simply. And you know what? I'm going to make that ask easier for you. Because I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. Right now, today, before you leave this building, you're going to sit down with Dr. Torres over there, and you're going to start building a real plan. Not a I'll try harder plan. A this is how I survive plan. Therapy, medication evaluation, support groups, crisis numbers in your phone, people who know the truth and check on you. Real infrastructure. Because you don't rebuild alone. He turned to Mark. And you? You get to choose right now what kind of husband you're going to be. You can be angry that she didn't tell you sooner. You can be hurt that she didn't trust you. Or you can be the person who says, I didn't see it before, but I see it now, and I'm not looking away again. Which one are you going to be? Mark wiped his eyes. I'm staying. His voice broke. I'm so sorry I didn't see it. You weren't looking at the right things. Dr. Phil said, not unkindly. You were looking at symptoms. Late nights. Short tempers. Distance. You were treating it like a marriage problem when it was a medical crisis. Now you know. So now you act. Dr. Phil stood up and walked over to where his envelope had fallen. He picked it up, looked at it for a moment, then handed it to one of the producers. We're not using any of this. Not the footage we got before. Not the questions. Nothing. He looked at Sarah. What we will do, with your permission, is this. We'll bring the audience back. We'll do a completely different show. About what actually happened here. About what it looks like when someone finally tells the truth. About how asking for help isn't weakness, it's the bravest thing a person can do. But only if you're comfortable with that. If you're not, you walk out that door right now with Dr. Torres, and we never speak of this again publicly. Your choice. Sarah looked at Mark. He nodded. She looked back at Dr. Phil. If it helps even one person say what I should have said 5 years ago, then yes. Let's do it. The audience filed back in 45 minutes later. They were told there had been a technical issue. Not a lie exactly. The issue was that something real had happened, and reality doesn't always fit into commercial breaks. When the cameras rolled again, Dr. Phil sat in his chair, but his posture was different. Sarah and Mark sat in theirs, but they were different too. Closer together. Mark's hand on her shoulder. What you're about to see, Dr. Phil said to the camera, is not what we planned. It's better. Because life doesn't follow a script. And sometimes the most important moment is when you throw the script away and deal with what's actually happening. He turned to Sarah. Tell them what you told me. And she did. Haltingly at first, then with increasing strength. She told the truth about the darkness. About the mornings she wished wouldn't come. About the mask she wore for 5 years. About the moment, 18 minutes into a TV taping, when she finally couldn't hold it anymore. The audience didn't applaud. They cried. Dozens of them. Because in every audience, there are people carrying the same secret. The same dark thoughts. The same conviction that speaking it aloud would shatter everything. When Sarah finished, Dr. Phil pulled out a business card. Not a prop. His actual card, with his office's crisis hotline written on the back in his own handwriting. This is for anyone watching at home right now who heard their story in Sarah's words. He said to the camera. You call this number. Tonight. Tomorrow. Whenever the thoughts get too loud. Because what Sarah showed us today is that the most dangerous prison is the one you lock yourself in by staying silent. He handed the card to Sarah, but he was talking to everyone. The key to that prison is 7 words. I need help and I can't do this alone. That's it. 7 words. And yes, they're hard. They might be the hardest words you ever say. But you know what's harder? Not being here tomorrow to wish you'd said them. The studio was so quiet you could hear the HVAC system humming. Dr. Phil looked directly into camera 1, and for a moment, he wasn't a talk show host. He was a clinical psychologist who'd spent decades in rooms with people on the edge. If you take nothing else from this episode, take this: your life matters. Not the version of your life that looks good on social media. Not the version your family thinks you have. Your actual, messy, complicated, sometimes unbearably painful life matters. And you deserve help. Not someday. Not when you're bad enough to justify it. Right now. Today. This minute. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Because somewhere, someone watching this needs to know they're not alone. The episode aired 3 weeks later. The network wanted to cut it. Too raw, they said. Too uncomfortable. Doesn't fit the format. Dr. Phil told them if they cut 1 second, they could find a new host. It aired unedited. Within hours, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline reported a 340% increase in calls. Within days, Sarah's story had been shared 11 million times. Within weeks, Dr. Phil's office received over 40,000 messages from people who said 7 words they'd never said before. I need help and I can't do this alone. Sarah Mitchell entered intensive therapy that same day. 6 months later, she appeared on Dr. Phil again. Not as a guest. As a volunteer crisis counselor, trained and certified, answering phones for people like her. The white envelope Dr. Phil dropped that day was never thrown away. He keeps it in his office, empty, as a reminder. The best moments happen when you stop reading the script and start reading the room. Sometimes saving a life means breaking the rules. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop pretending everything's fine and start dealing with what's real.